Johnny, wow, that's a lot, man. Hey, anyway, I wanted to bring you on because I feel like this rule that MX Sports put in right now literally affects, like, you're a privateer champion. You go, you want those guys to make money. You got Jeff Walker and all these guys that are your buddies. But MX Sports seems to be wanting to either edit or look at or approve. What's going on with this new rule?
I do a little bit more research with the rule, but offhand, I was getting ready to set up an application to try to film at the races. But then at the very bottom, there's something that you have to attest to that says, hey, if we don't like your content, we can basically delete it. And I'm going, they've never liked my content. So it'd be like instantly delete. And I'm a big freedom of speech. And that compiled with the GoPro rule, with them not having it on the helmet, it has to be on the chest strap now. And then you also have to have another application for that. And then they basically kind of own the footage until it gets reviewed and whatever. It's going to make it hard for AJ, for Jeff Walker, for pretty much all of the bigger YouTube privateers, or just anybody coming up to try to get some better content than just at the privateer track, because most people want to see the stuff at the races. And like the little Degans have, not little anymore. They've got over 1 million subscribers, and big money comes with views. So just trying to narrow down and lock down the sport as far as controlling all aspects of media. Just, we know my political views. It sounds like a certain individual, and it seems like the sport is killing itself.
Would that individual you're referring to maybe Hitler?
I wasn't quite going that far. I was going more of like current president, but
okay, fair enough. I wasn't sure. It sounded pretty bad. It's like somebody wants all control of everything, and that's where I go. So, Coach, what do you think about this thing?
Well, I mean, it scares me to death to think that somebody could have control over somebody's content that they're wearing on their body, capturing data. And I don't think it's going to take a rocket scientist to figure out. The privateers have used it as a way to create revenue for themselves. And now right off the bat, MX Sports is going to frog hop in front of them to find a way to cut yet another revenue stream off. I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but let's go back to Chad Reed coming in with a helmet camera that wasn't GoPro, wasn't allowed to run it, wasn't allowed to run CBD, MD, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's very interesting how any place and any way that somebody can create revenue for themselves outside of MX Sports finds a very creative way to get in between it. And owning the property, owning the events, owning everything that they do. I just would be curious to see if it's legally permissible. I'm not a big fan of, frivolous lawsuits, but at what point does it stop? We're not even getting into the subject yet that motocross is the only sport that the participants that draw the crowds actually pay to race. That still blows my mind. It's like asking a Major League Baseball player to pay to play. We're not going to go there. But the idea that now you've got a revenue stream for somebody that they're not allowed to do. At what point do they, again, everybody in the comments in the last couple of videos that you cut up, how many times did we see Riders Union? How many times has Johnny talked about Riders Union? How much worse is it going to get before there's a Riders Union? I don't know if Blake Baggett's going to be at the helm of that. Would Chad Reed be at the helm of that? I mean, I look at how Chad got screwed out of the last couple of years of him trying to keep his team going, and all he did was get chopped off. I still don't understand where discount tire money went. I mean, I could go on and on the where did the monies go, but yet Chad's team didn't have it, but yet we saw advertisements trackside. Now, yet again, another form of revenue for a privateer, and now that's been siphoned off as well. At what point can the riders fight this?
Johnny, what are you going to tell these guys, your buddies, if they're getting edited and they're saying, the thing that caught me was that if anything that wasn't positive for the sport was that, if I remember, I'll put the wording up here on the YouTube video, but I believe that really caught my attention. And that's something I dealt with last year when they were kind of telling me, I got into it over press passes and the knucklehead, Brandon, is that his name? The dipshit that hands out the passes? Yeah, dipshit. Anyway, he was rude and he was a dick. And he told me I needed to work with them and put out more positive content promoting them before I was eligible to get a pass. Well, hey, I'll buy my own. But then I also saw it like it seems weird the way they wrote this too. It almost feels like, so if I buy my own ticket and go get some footage, they can still go after me. Does that sound about right? Coach, that's kind of what you were thinking, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the way that I read it. When you get down to the very bottom, it's almost, you've got to read it very slowly and meticulously. It's as if you get a pass, there's a certain set of rules and regulations, and then someone like yourself or Hopper that goes and just buys a ticket, there's a stipulation there, like you will be barred for future events if you don't follow the steps that are outlined in the previous part of the, let's call it a contract for lack of better terminology, or form as Johnny called it. So that's the way I interpret it. Now, again, maybe somebody from MX Sports would be willing to come on and clarify it if we're wrong. But Johnny, what do you think? Did I interpret it correctly?
I agree with you guys wholeheartedly. It's one of those issues where it's constructive criticism. Is constructive criticism always considered a bad thing? And it seems like they can only control the guys that go to the races, and you wave kind of like going to the tracks, I'm not going to hurt myself, etc. So that's one of their ways, because they can obviously see that there's channels like mine, and then there's channels like Cooksy's and yours, Coach, that we talk about some real stuff that is actually happening in the sport that might not shed the greatest of light on people behind the scene and what actually takes place. And therefore, it's getting to a point where they're trying to shut it down. It's this whole cancel culture, and MX Sports is joining. They're putting the whole shot button in, and they want to be the first one of the first turn first.
I don't want to just sit and beat a dead horse. We got our words out. It's a stupid ass rule. You guys know I had some interesting text messages this week, and maybe later in this podcast we'll get in. Go ahead, Coach.
One thing that I want the listeners to pay attention to is when you were told about getting credentials are predicated off of you speaking positively about the series. I think it's incredibly ironic that everything that you put out was complimenting MX Sports for keeping the Outdoor Nationals alive. In all fairness, there wasn't anything derogatorily spoken about the series. You gave all the props, you gave race recaps, you did everything you could to try to, just like every other media outlet, to bring credibility to the series, bring attention to the riders, bring, hey, little things that were happening. Maybe somebody had a good late moto charge. You really gave a good blow by blow of why the racing was so damn good. It's not like, and I think that's where the listeners, or rather, I hope the listeners are understanding, we're not on a witch hunt for any promoter, Feld, MX Sports, MXGP, none of it. All we're asking is questions. How many times, Chris, have you and I said this on our show already? All we're doing is looking at the evidence of a contract or an agreement or some form of paperwork that any rider is going to be required to fill out. Now, the media group has to do that. Now the riders have to do that under the auspices of a media content provider. So I hope the listeners understand you having to jump over hurdles to get a pass when all you did was just essentially give race reports. You didn't say anything derogatory about it. I think Johnny's done a better job of showing the pay hasn't changed much in a decade, 20, 25 years. You brought up the idea. I loved the statistic that you put up about the percentage of revenue that's from the Major League Baseball and NFL and NBA. And all I said was the model doesn't make sense. I used the PGA. Somebody on one of the comments on one of the videos that you put together, one of the clips said maybe the cut's $5,000. And so I apologize. Like I told you, even when we were doing the pod, I don't follow golf. I'm not a big fan of golf. Nothing against it. I just find it boring. But the point is, I would love for a 20th place guy in Supercross or even a 40th place guy in motocross to make $5,000 for making the cut. That's why I said, and if somebody would go back and watch the video, I was just saying it was all in relative terms. It's all a sliding scale. I don't give a rat's ass if it's $5 grand or 50K.